Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Paula Glover. I am the president of the Alliance to Save Energy, and I want to welcome you to EU Energy Days and this afternoon's session. Today, most appropriately, those of you who have been here early in the week know that we have signed a pledge, 117 countries, and so now we have some work to do. And so this is the beginning of a conversation, but we are going to leave here with action plans in hand and getting ready to work. I want to first welcome our two sponsors for this panel. First, Kadri Simon from the European Commission for Energy, and then after she gives some opening remarks, I'm going to welcome Dr. Fatih Birol, who's the Executive Director for the International Energy Agency. Kadri.
Thank you, Ms. Glover, for your introductory remarks. Dear Dr. Fatih Birol, dear Dr. Abu Said, dear Anne Mettler, I'm glad to kick off today's event on energy efficiency, the first fuel of a more sustainable future. For too long, energy efficiency was not sufficiently appreciated as a solution for tackling the climate crisis and cutting dependence on fossil fuels. But the EU's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the energy crisis proved otherwise. So we have made enormous energy savings, especially on gas consumption, and Europe was able to get through the very difficult winter last year. And this was just as important as our work to diversify supplies away from Russian gas and fast forward the clean energy transition. And without energy efficiency measures, the impact of the energy crisis on productivity would have been worse. Now we are putting in place the building blocks to have a stronger EU framework on energy efficiency, a framework to help us stay the course, to reach our 2030 energy and climate targets in the most cost-effective manner, and decouple economic growth from energy consumption. And we are here at COP, ready and willing to use our experience to build momentum for urgent global action on energy efficiency. So let me explain in a bit more detail. First, we have revised EU legislation to increase ambition and put in place stronger measures on energy efficiency for accelerating the energy transition. It includes the guiding principle, energy efficiency first. This means considering energy efficiency in planning and investment decisions across all sectors, including the financial sector. We now also have a new binding EU target, which aims to reduce final energy consumption by 11.7% by 2030 across the EU 27 member states. And we nearly doubled the annual energy savings obligation, which is an important instrument in key sectors such as buildings, industry, and of course transport. And second, we are finalizing work to revise an EU-wide law on the energy performance of buildings. Buildings are the biggest consumer of energy in the EU. Over half of it comes from fossil fuels, so it is indispensable and urgent to take action here. And third, we are launching a European Energy Efficiency Financing Coalition, which is expected to be operational early next year. We will bring together our member states and financial institutions to unlock additional private finance for energy efficiency. We estimate that we will need around 300 billion euros per year by 2030. And we all know that public resources alone cannot fill this gap, but it can significantly leverage private resources and provide investment certainty. And this will accelerate new business cases, also for SMEs and big companies in net zero manufacturing and services, and the rollout of mature clean technologies, such as solar thermal and heat pumps, demand response, and of course storage. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU is ambitious on energy efficiency and keen to share what we have learned. This includes our involvement in the Energy Efficiency Hub for a voluntary collaboration among governments, and we are here at COP28 committed to the global pledge to double global energy efficiency improvements from around 2 to above 4% annually by 2030. And having now 121 countries endorsed this pledge, is a big win for us. And now that the goal is set, we must work together on implementation. Of course, circumstances are different, but all countries have scope to generate positive decarbonization and economic impacts through energy efficiency. And I hope that together we can embrace energy efficiency as the first fuel driving our collective sustainable future. Thank you.
Dr. Birol, I invite you to make a couple of remarks.
So, good morning, dear colleagues, Madam Commissioner, dear Madam Commissioner from Africa, dear colleagues, a very good morning to all of you. We are at the IEA, as you mentioned, Madam Commissioner. Many years ago, we call energy efficiency as the first fuel. Then after a while, I understood that there was not enough reaction from governments. I changed the first fuel to a very first fuel. And now it worked. So this is perhaps the way of doing it a bit more passionately. Now, as Madam Commissioner said, we are very happy that so many countries around the world agreed what IEA's net zero roadmap tells us, namely tripling the renewable capacity and doubling the energy efficiency improvement. And when we share these findings with the entire world and also with the colleagues in Brussels, I was so happy that there was a ownership coming from Brussels, from Madam President, Madam Commissioner, and many countries. And now, as a result of their diplomatic efforts, we have more than 100 countries sign this very important pledge. And, dear colleagues, what makes me really encouraged in terms of energy efficiency is, in the last 2 years, so I will not give many numbers. My colleagues tell me I give too many numbers, but I give one number to you. In the last 2 years, 3/4 of the global economy, the countries, introduce new energy policies, energy efficiency policies, or strengthen the existing ones. So this is very important. So 3/4 of the global economy pushed energy efficiency. And I think there are 3 reasons behind that. One, the energy crisis after 24th of February made the people understand that the energy efficiency is a friend of energy security. Number 2, the prices, energy prices went up. It was an additional driver of saving energy, so saving money. And number 3, of course, energy efficiency is a major pillar of addressing the climate change. So we are very happy to see that many governments have supported this rather important finding of the IEA. In fact, last summer, we brought in our global energy efficiency conference, we do it every year, the biggest energy efficiency gathering. My colleague, Mr. Motherway, and his team puts together, and you were there, Madam Commissioner, and Madam Commissioner, you were there, and was there, and many colleagues were there. 46 countries agreed to doubling energy efficiency. We call it the meeting was in nowhere but in Versailles, in Paris. There was an agreement of 46 countries energy efficiency improvement. Now, what needs to happen after this? We are, Madam Commissioner, we ask too much, I know, but if I can ask one more thing, in fact, 2 more things. One, pledge is good. But if you don't fulfill your pledge, nobody comes and tells you, why don't you do it? So therefore, we would very much like to see, as the International Energy Agency, this pledge finds its place in the final document together with the renewable pledge, tripling of renewable capacities. I think I very much count on the European countries' diplomatic muscles, abilities, machinery to put it as one of the key outcomes of this very COP28 here. And finally, Madam Commissioner, EU is always, as I say, this morning, this is the EU Energy Day. I said EU is always in front of many others, one step ahead. In fact, today is the EU Energy Day, and tomorrow, EU Energy Day, tomorrow is the World Energy Day. EU is one step always earlier and quicker, so thank you very much for that. But now I have one other request. EU should provide a strong, clear support to Africa. Africa is Europe's neighbor. And you need neighbors when you are in trouble. And if Europe wants to build a bridge of trust between Europe and Africa, I think energy transition, clean energy, is a very important potential. Within the clean energy, a key topic for me, because I know how much EU takes the gender issue so seriously, which puts the clean energy and gender together, it is the issue of cooking. In Africa today, 80% of the families use primitive cook stoves for cooking. 80%, using wood, agricultural waste, animal waste. And it leads a lot of smoke and as such respiratory diseases, especially women who are cooking there. According to our analysis with the WHO, every year, 500,000 women die prematurely because of the respiratory diseases coming from the primitive cooking. And I ask my colleagues to analyze, to fix this problem requires only $4 billion, which is nothing when you think about a few things. What we are so it is the reason IEA, and I mentioned this morning, this spring, next spring 2024, I am holding a major international conference in Paris to bring the government leaders from advanced economies, especially from Europe, but also others, the leaders from the Africa, philanthropists, energy industry, and the others, to find a solution to this energy, and in my view, the most important gender issue we are facing today. We count on you, Madam Commissioner, we count on Europe once again to be on the right side of the history. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So let me bring up our keynote speaker, Ann Mettler, Vice President for Europe at Breakthrough Energy, and a little bit about Ann. Ann started her career at the World Economic Forum, where she led the Europe Department. Later, she served as Director General at the European Commission, where she ran the Internal Strategy Department, reporting directly to the President. At Breakthrough Energy, she is working with European partners to accelerate clean tech innovation in the pursuit of climate neutrality and a net zero emissions future. Please welcome Ann Mettler.
Thank you so much. Dear Commissioner Simpson, dear Fatih Birol, dear Commissioner of the African Union, dear ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure to be invited to reflect about energy efficiency. An issue that has now squarely moved into the political limelight. It was already said, it's now been made a global pledge and one of the official outcomes of this COP28. And let me say, this occurs not a moment too soon. I remember when at the height of the crisis, the energy crisis that was already referred to, after natural gas had been weaponized against us by Russia, and the price subsequently rose sixfold in a matter of a few short months. Back then, I asked a CEO of one of Europe's most important energy companies, what would be the most impactful thing that we could do to quickly alleviate this threatening situation. And without skipping a beat, he said, increase energy efficiency. He described it as low-hanging fruit, a lever we could pull relatively easily to relieve the immediate pain. Fast forward, and about 3 weeks ago, I spoke to the European CEO of a major industrial digitalization company, the kind of company that can provide the necessary services to achieve energy efficiency. Now, this CEO told me that whatever pressure we felt back in the summer and autumn days of 2022 had in fact dissipated. Now that the price of natural gas had come down and we were anticipating a glut of LNG from 2024 onwards, neither firms nor private customers were investing in the kinds of services that could help reduce their energy consumption. This was puzzling, or maybe not. Is feeling the pain the necessary trigger to do more with less? And are we, by alleviating the pain, unintentionally delaying the energy transition we purportedly want to drive forward? The other day, I came across this graph, if we can show it. So it depicts the spending priorities of the German government in a budget allocation that has subsequently been ruled unconstitutional and will therefore need to be scrapped. You may have heard that the German Vice Chancellor and Minister for Climate and Economy today canceled his trip to COP28 to deal with this crisis, what this has caused. What you see here is incredibly interesting. On the right, in the yellow bar, you see the subsidies for the continued use of fossil energy. And on the left, in the green bar, you see the allocation to clean energy. The intention is clear. Lessen the immediate pain of still high energy prices while building up the new clean energy system. But as I know, as someone who works on the clean technology frontier, keeping fossil energy reasonably priced makes it difficult, if not impossible, for nascent clean technologies to scale and become cost competitive. And even mature clean technologies, such as wind, are facing that challenge. And to be clear, keeping fossil energy cheap also reduces the demand for energy efficiency measures. If I know that Europe has spent more than 600 billion euros in subsidizing the continued use of fossil energy, then I have to conclude that this is money that cannot be and has not been spent in ways that would bring us closer to our climate goals. So from that, let me extrapolate 4 lessons and recommendations on energy efficiency that I would like to leave with this room. Firstly, sequencing. Policymakers need to get the timing of their interventions right. Of course, we had to subsidize fossil energy when the immediate crisis hit, and we were facing a cold winter of truly excruciating hardship, a winter of discontent. Commissioner, you spoke about it. I am, however, doubtful that we still have to do this 22 months into this horrific war in Ukraine. And we may need to accept, without pain, no gain. We need to, at least to some extent, feel the pain of high fossil fuel prices to have the stimulus to save and switch to cleaner sources. Relieving pain relieves the pressure. And when it comes to energy efficiency, that may well be completely counterproductive, which brings me to my second point, definition. In my preparatory call for this session, I was told that the EU considers energy efficiency the reduction of energy consumption. What may sound sensible can be extremely misleading. We know that a large chunk of the reduction in energy demand in 2022 and 2023 were not due to true energy savings, but rather to a mild winter and to deindustrialization. I've said it before, hoping for good weather is not sound public policy. And honestly, no one signed up for decarbonization through deindustrialization. So we urgently need more nuanced, meaningful indicators, which takes me to my next and related point, namely metrics. We urgently need energy-related metrics that can feed meaningfully into macroeconomic policy and national accounts. In the 20th century, labor productivity was the defining factor for progress and wealth creation. It is why national budgets allocate sizable sums to education, to research, to training and lifelong learning. We know that our brains are our country's most prized assets, but we also know that this is no longer enough. Even with a high endowment of human capital, a resource-poor geography like the EU will face existential economic struggles now that energy has become weaponized and is often the source of great volatility and even coercion. That is why I believe, with everything that I have learned in public policy and that I have learned from working in public policy, that what labor productivity was in the 20th century, resource productivity will be in the 21st. Doing more with less, lower energy input, fewer materials, more circularity, and more renewable power will become the decisive factor, not only in our growth prospects, which we still need, but also our sovereignty and our security. I like the way, Fatih Birol, you put it. You said, energy efficiency is a friend of energy security. You're absolutely right. Which brings me to my last and final point. Energy efficiency is an incredible market opportunity. I remember well when a decade ago we worked hard to digitalize every single company, to connect every household to super-fast broadband. We understood that digitalization needed widespread use, and I emphasize the word use, to drive innovation, productivity, and inclusion. A whole slew of companies provided these services, and as a result, the digital part of our economy has consistently and for many years prospered. I believe we now stand on the cusp of a similar transformation. This Commission has made the twin transition, the digital and the green, its hallmark. But the fact is that they have, for the most part, been treated as separate dossiers. But if we do manage to combine the two, if we digitalize the grid, if we fit every home with a smart meter, if we use artificial intelligence to optimize industrial processes, then we will drive energy efficiency, and we will do so on an industrial scale. Companies that provide these sophisticated services will thrive, consumers will save, and the policymaker will finally have better insights and therefore more levers. Because let's face it, we can only manage what we can actually measure. And without these critical data points, we are de facto often operating in the complete dark. So ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, previous times of scarcity and crisis have unleashed unimaginable innovations. It was the oil crisis of the early 1970s that made us bold enough to harness energy from the sun and power from the wind. What seemed like an elusive dream then is today the very anchor of our energy transition. It is my profound hope and wish that a resource-poor EU, neither a major producer of fossil energy, nor at the forefront of clean tech manufacturing, that this Europe will now double down and seize the opportunity that is inherent in this combined climate, energy security, and industrial competitiveness crisis. Doing more with less can be our hallmark, our achievement, and our competitive edge. And energy efficiency will lead the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne. So we're going to move into our first panel. I'm going to ask all of you to give us about 5 minutes. Just be patient as we bring on our first group of panelists. Kadri is here, George Youssef, and Amani Abu Zaid. Thank you.
The world is not on track to meet the Paris Agreement goal and to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's why President von der Leyen has suggested a global pledge on renewables and energy efficiency. Working together to achieve net zero is a must for the climate, a new frontier for technology, an opportunity for businesses, and a driver for good jobs. What is the purpose? This global pledge will create a global movement of countries committed to speed up the energy transition in this critical decade. It would help measure progress on the transition with simple metrics on renewables and energy efficiency. What are the benefits? Why renewables and energy efficiency? Because these are the key solutions to fight climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and create millions of new jobs by 2030. How will we achieve this? The pledge's ultimate goal is to move away from fossil fuel use in a timely manner, consistent with the Paris Agreement. To achieve this, we must collectively aim to triple the world's renewable installed capacity by 2030 to at least 11 terawatts, and double the rate of annual energy efficiency improvements this decade compared to the previous one. Join us, the UAE COP presidency and global leaders for the launch of the pledge at COP28. Together, we can make a difference.
Okay, we are ready to get started. I'm going to just give you some brief introductions of all of our panelists, and then we're going to start having a nice little discussion. We only have 35 minutes and a lot to cover. I'm expecting that you all will have all the answers, and we're going to walk out of here ready to go. So to my direct left is Kadri Simpson. She is an Estonian politician from the Center Party, European Commissioner for Energy in the von der Leyen Commission since December 1st, 2019. She was previously Minister of Economic Affairs and Communications in Jüri Ratas' first cabinet from 2016 to 2019, and I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing the names correctly. I apologize. Next to her is Amani Abu Zaid, who is an Egyptian international development lead expert who has been serving Africa in various leading positions for over 30 years, mainly in international organizations such as the African Development Bank, the United Nations Development Program, and the United States Agency for International Development. She was elected the new Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy. That's wrong? Twice elected to the energy, so twice elected Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union Commission, correct? And next to her is Mr. George Youssef, who is the mayor of Menjes, Lebanon. In recognition of Mr. Youssef's work as mayor of Menjes for more urban sustainability in his city, he has been recently appointed member of the board of mayors and leaders of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Welcome. Thank you so much. So we heard Dr. Birol give us a little bit of a challenge. $4 billion is what I think was the number that he put out there. And so the first question I want to ask you, and I'm going to start with you, Amani, is that as you think about this role of energy efficiency in achieving our net zero goals by 2050, what are those policy developments that are needed to achieve that pledge, to double the average rate of energy efficiency over this next decade, by 2030? So we actually don't have a full decade, we have 6 years.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to this important session, and particularly with Her Excellency Commissioner Simpson here, and also to hear from Lebanon on this excellent example that will be provided. I would like to put also in context what was said earlier regarding specifically regarding Africa. Yes. To put it in context, yeah, I agree with Fatih, except that we need to know what we're talking about. Only half of the continent of Africa is 55 countries. Only half of our continent has access to electricity, meaning almost 600 million Africans do not have electricity to start with. So even the concept of efficiency when we talk about Africa is not what you have in mind. Right. Same thing when we talk about clean cooking, and that's a very important topic for us in the continent. And between 800 and 900 million Africans use primitive sources, including coal or firewood or untreated animal waste for cooking, which again, efficiency, again, here has a different sense when we talk. Nevertheless, we started our program for energy efficiency years ago. We did not wait the crops, because energy crisis in Africa has been persistent for decades, except that when things happened or problems, major ones happened in Europe, then the world woke up to another energy crisis, except ours has been always there and did not necessarily get the attention that is required. Now, while we are working on providing electricity, in Africa, and also working on the clean cooking aspects, we are trying through the program for energy efficiency to ensure that we optimize the use of the energy already being produced. And we started actually this program long ago, 2015, with the IEA biometrics, even to measure what we do. And without measuring, you cannot do anything. So a program for database for measuring energy consumption. And what really helped that in recent years, like it was said earlier, digital technologies are very much helping in that respect. This was also, this happened in parallel when our countries started, urbanization increased, and Africa is the largest digitalizing continent, so also the use of digital in managing infrastructure in the new cities starting to pick up. All these things are helping us to see where the problems are. But that's only on the generation aspect. We have to also work on appliances and on the various technologies. You hear about efficiency in heat pumps. No one is talking about efficiency in cooling, and that's our biggest problem.
Yeah.
Our biggest problem on the continent is fans, ACs, which, are going to quadruple between now and the need for those, between now and 2050. The technology is not picking up as fast in order to ensure that we still use, be provided with cooling, but at less consumption. And then there are the appliances. Yes, we developed for the continent the labeling, the maps, and the same thing for the transport. There is, in addition, the EU provide the labeling or the standards, but if this is not coupled with market control, not to allow these appliances or these cars or to get into the market, then you have a problem. And that's the problem that we have in the continent, is that our markets are also flooded and dumped by many low standard, high consumption appliances or cars, and that's a big problem. So only a few countries in the continent have managed really to work on those things. And of course, they are dumped and people use them because they were cheaper. Now everyone understands with the high energy prices, and also the countries removing their subsidies, from electricity and so on and so forth. They're trying to reduce they're not using as much. I want to caution against this because we've seen something happening over the last 2 years. People who even started to use more electric stoves and cleaner, for instance, energy for cooking, because of the prices, they are going back to coal and waste. So be mindful is that there are also contexts that are different. So affordability is not just a reduction, but affordability, especially in our continent, is a key issue. Yeah. Last but not least, and I'm sure I will give the floor to someone else, the 30 to 40% of the waste that we are having in electricity in the continent is due to the very bad shape of our grids. And not enough investments are being put in the transmission and in the modernization of the transmission. In the whole continent, only one country has really state-of-the-art grid, smart grid, and that's Egypt. And that's actually the only country that has, a nationwide smart grid, as I said, state-of-the-art in the whole of Africa and even the MENA region. But that's 1 out of 55. Yeah. So I would like you to rethink, to recontextualize when you talk about efficiency, where we are and what efficiency means in the different contexts, and eventually the social consequences, health consequences of whatever program that we are putting in place, and also the issue of affordability. Fatih spoke about the change in policies for energy efficiency and energy and clean energy. Actually, half of our continent are revising, or already are in the process of revising the policies regulations in order to do that. And I thank you for now. And then I'm sure there will be other points.
No, thank you for that. Thank you so much. Kadri, why don't you add on?
I agree that challenges for Europe and for Africa are different. But we both can opt for solutions that help us to save energy. And Dr. Abu Said just mentioned the keyword, grids, because indeed your continent is also going under the urbanization. And the cities I have seen in African continent, there you see these bundles of distribution grid wires that really could be modernized, and by doing so, the savings would be significant. So this is something that we are doing back in Europe too. We have to modernize our electricity grids. We plan to do so to accommodate more renewables, but also to save energy when we can. And I heard Ann Mettler delivering her keynote speech earlier today, and she mentioned that majority of the savings for Europe last winter came to the mild weather conditions and due to the fact that prices were too expensive. But I am proud of these structural measures that actually helped us to address demand-side response. We agreed with our governments that we will propose legislation that allows us to cut the electricity consumption at peak hours. And this is exactly this time when otherwise, the gas-fired power plants can only cover the excess demand that is there. So demand-side response, explaining to consumers that there are specific times of the day when they should shift their consumption, helped us a lot. But of course, that means also that we have to educate our consumers, and what else will educate them better than price signal. And my other message is that the public awareness plays a key role. Last year, across Europe, many families understood that their individual action will help us to cut our dependency on imported Russian fossil fuels, but also will secure that they will not face in the middle of the winter difficulties that there is just not enough fuel available. So across Europe, millions of households made their personal investment decision to opt for the latest technology, and this is electricity to heat their homes. And there are also devices that are consuming significantly less electricity when you cool your homes. So this is something that of course needs public awareness, but all together across the member states helps us to save large volumes of fuel that otherwise would be wasted.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. George, from where you sit as a mayor, I think you offer an interesting perspective on the types of policies that we would need. And then after you talk about that, because we're going to move into the second question, I want you to talk about what are the challenges that you might see moving forward in this direction.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. First, I would like to introduce my city.
Sure.
Menjez is a municipality in Lebanon located at the far north of Lebanon. And you see now Lebanon is facing so much crisis. And finally, we have a very big financial crisis. The Lebanese pound has devaluated 2,000% of its real value. For this, we choose to work in localizing especially funding opportunities. And we have so much funding opportunities in the region of MENA region. And now with the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East, also we are facing so much challenges. For this, we build partnerships with so much NGOs, national and international NGOs, and especially academic also, universities in Lebanon and outside Lebanon, to build especially strategies. We build strategies, action plans in different sectors, in energy, forest fire, tourism, and also because our region is affected by desertification and deforestation, especially deforestation. For this, when we have an action plan or strategy is a solid document to present to funding agencies and to have money not especially for the municipality, but for the partners of the municipality to implement in our territory a sustainable development project or climate resilience project. And after that, we have implemented, maybe we can talk after this question, so much project. So much project like solar photovoltaic power plant, such rainwater harvesting, briquette factory to transform all our forest waste and agriculture waste into briquette for heating. And we replace all our street lighting and public lighting into LED lighting because we have so much archaeological sites in the village and natural sites in the village, we have applied to the UNESCO to put all our cultural heritage and natural heritage, and we have success in this, and now we are at the tentative list for UNESCO World Heritage Site. Okay. And we need to protect more all these sites. We can talk after with other question.
Sure. Amani, you started by, I think, really getting us setting really great context about what efficiency looks like in Africa. And so I'd like to ask you to follow up on those thoughts and tell us about some of the barriers, the challenges that you may see coming forward, but more importantly, what are the opportunities? Because I think we need to be focusing on those things.
Yeah, listen, I mean, the opportunity for us is that it's true that in some places you have to deal with the legacy, but also we are building or rebuilding the continent. So the opportunity is that in this, I mean, urbanization that is being accelerated on the continent and digitalization at the same time, so we can afford in some places to create environments, I mean, ecosystems that allow both, say, for renewables or for efficiency to be applied. And I'm saying digitalization because we are adopting digital in almost everything now in the continent, amazingly, even in rural areas. So that is a fantastic opportunity for us. And already we have examples of places across the continent where you have cities that are have applied energy efficiency or renewables, you know, for a whole city in green cities across the continent. That's excellent. But I think the matter has to be not anecdotal, but, you know, harmonized across the continent. That is why at the African Union, our policies for the Africa policy harmonization regulation of the sector is exactly for that purpose, not to have anecdotal or sporadic examples, rather to have this, you know, for the whole continent. So that is one. And we are also developing a master plan of energy for the continent for 2040. That's in a few years. That at the one hand addresses the issues of electricity generation, clean cooking, but also transmission, other aspects, and energy efficiency. We are trying, I mean, to do that and to implement it, though it's a mammoth task, but to implement it between here and 2040. This is investment. This is, and when I say it's half of the continent has access to this or that, that's a fantastic niche, and that's what I keep saying. I mean, no other place on earth you will never find as bigger a market than this that is available now, that for investments, for technologies to be applied, for human resources, especially young people, to be there. So whether we start skilling, upskilling those existing, investing and developing, it's fantastic, it's huge. And already work is being done in that sense. However, we need to emphasize that this is not the work of a public policy alone. Also, we need the private sector, which is something that our countries are working on with our support, of course. I mean, see, the African Development Bank is here. That's what investment climate. And in order to attract the private sector to get into energy efficiency, among others, but also investment energy in general. Technology is another thing. I mean, we're talking here about top technology, not just to reduce the consumption or a bulb. But now energy efficiency also involves, I'll give an example. I mean, the heat that is coming out of your refrigerator, you can, make a conduit and reuse it in something else. And it's being done. It's not, I'm not saying here that it's rocket science. It's being done elsewhere. But we need to use this much more, the existing industries, to refit them with, with the right technology to be more efficient for, circularity, for the to use or to reuse, cleaner forms of energy and so on and so forth. So technology investment, especially for the private sector, and it is a challenge, but it's at the same time the largest opportunity, I would dare say, on earth, especially given Africa's centrality, both for Europe, we are the providers now, or main provider for clean energy, for Europe and for the world, and also for ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to follow up and ask both of you to answer this. Because the opportunity is so great, we have many sectors that we need to decarbonize. Where do we start? Do you have a preference? Is it buildings? Is it transport? Is it industry? How do you kind of think about that, and where should people be really leaning in first, if you have a first? George.
Maybe it's important also for municipalities. I talk such as a mayor. We need a learning program, learning awareness, exchange of good practices with mayors from our countries and other success mayors in Europe or US or Japan or other country. First, these programs, and the EU is very active in my country in this project. We have a project named ClimaMed project, and with this project we have so much toolkits and learning session to help mayors to build strategies, sustainable energy action plan and climate plan and other climate resilience strategies. With this, with learning, after learning and exchange of good practices, we can go to see the opportunity in municipalities. We can't, by example, talk about smart lighting if we have not electricity in the grid. And when we build these strategies, we can search the right project to implement in these municipalities. In the first public lighting and especially thermal chauffage, thermal heating. It's very important in this country. We can use renewable or biomass to more success in this way. By example, in our municipality, in the last 10 years, we have so much cutting of trees. To resolve this problem, we build with a fund from Norwegian embassy in Lebanon. We build a factory to transform all our forest waste and pruning and other agriculture waste into briquette for heating. And now all residents in the municipality can use this briquette for heating in winter season. And also for water and conflict of water. Water is very delicate in our region. We begin to collect rainwater. We harvest rainwater and use these facilities of rainwater harvesting for agriculture and also for tourism with hill lakes and other structure.
So it sounds like you're saying that the first step is obviously education of elected officials and knowing what the best practices are. I want to take a step further and just ask you both, as you think about education broadly of consumers and other stakeholders, is that also needed so that we're starting with our elected officials and then kind of working our way down? Is that correct? I'm asking.
Yes, yes, of course. We need to learn to aware all stakeholders and all strategies when we talk with strategies, because when we work with international norms and with European project or with cities movement like Global Covenant of Mayors and other, we need to prepare strategies. And these strategies is this strategy at municipal level is built with participatory approach. All stakeholders in the municipality give his opinion to resolve this problem or this challenge or other challenges.
Okay.
Maybe I pick up, but before I talk about Africa, I would like to really, I'm in all admiration of what Mr. Mayor is saying. Rarely I've been in an event where a municipality or a mayor has not said, oh, but the government did not give me, or the government did not do, and they took the matter in their own hands, and they decided to make things work for the city or for their municipality. I think he deserves a big round of applause.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
But let me go back then to the two questions for us in Africa. Our focus at the African Union is on the transport sector, efficiency in transport. Knowing that 25 to 30% of the emissions on the continent, even though we are the lowest emitting region, of course, still it comes from transport. And we are addressing this from two things. One, the existing transportation. We want to make sure that they are less emitting, both for us. I'll give you an example. Africa used to import lots of used cars, unsafe, unclean, I mean, you name it. So this is, now we are working with our countries. Several countries now have stopped the import of used cars. We are working even with the manufacturer of cars, even for new cars, because what has been sent to Africa, I mean, for sale, even new ones, did not meet the same standards of safety or sustainability as the ones sold in their own countries, which is really, anyway, that's, so we are even working with manufacturers. So that's an example. Shifting to another mode of another different energy source. Again, I'm going to use an example from Egypt. Since 2009, Egypt now fleet of, I mean, all the taxis in the street, they don't run on gas, they run on natural gas, which is, of course, much, much clearer than petrol and much cheaper. So it helped. I mean, that smart that used to be over Cairo has disappeared over the years. But this is not the only solution. We are saying that instead of these millions of cars in the streets that are, even, I mean, if they are use cleaner source of energy, we need to shift into sustainable and green urban transportation and railways, which have the power to lift, I mean, to remove from our streets at least 5 million cars. So investment in public transportation that are clean, even a viable railways network across the continent and within our countries will serve the dual purpose of improved mobility, operationalization of the African free trade area, but also the emission aspect and the efficiency. So, as I said, in Africa, you have to look at the context and look at the bigger picture, not just, and it's different from other parts of the world. As for the public awareness, of course, it is a pillar. I mean, for all of this to work, we have to be all the time working with the public and listening to the public. what are the impediments? Why are we doing this? Why are we changing or shifting from one to another? And if you, in most of our countries, you see on televisions and radios, all the time about even some countries extended, these, the LED bulbs, they are given for free in some parts of in some countries. The peak, the energy, the peak hours, how to reduce, and there are lots of, education programs that have to be put in place in order to have the buy-in of your people also into the programs that we are trying to implement in terms of energy efficiency.
And so we only have a little bit less than 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask you one last question, which is really, how does the public sector lead, but really, how does the private sector get involved? Because you're talking about a public-private partnership, and so we need to be able to support your efforts if we're all going to get there together. And so why don't we end with that at the mayoral level and also from where you're coming from?
At our level of the municipalities, PPPs are very important, especially to resolve problems when municipalities cannot resolve these problems, and when public sectors have human resources, specialized human resources to resolve these problems. At our level of my municipality, I am not really excited to give our public realization to a private sector. When we have a public sector with success story, we can keep this sector with the public authorities. Okay. But when we have incapacity to have a solution for a big problem or other problem, in this way we can have this partnership with the private sector to resolve this problem. Because now in our countries, and this is very bad, in all maybe Arab countries, when we have a sector with money returned to the public sector, our government gives this sector to the private sector. But this is a very, very success sector. It's not important to give this sector to the private sector. When we need the help of the private sector help us in a sector when we has failed.
Gotcha.
Well, this is not exactly why we see the importance of the private sector. Private sector, as we in our thinking and in our strategies, it's not just they're not there because it's a profitable business or not, or because of revenues. Private sector, yes, maybe private investments are needed because any country, any public budget cannot do things alone, but also technology transfer for the upskilling of workers, for the management style, for looking at the balance sheet and the bottom line. These are things that we also need to do, and also because of in our context, again, I'm talking about Africa, the challenges are so big or are multiple challenges that we would like for governments to do the things they do best. And to allow for innovation, for creativity, especially in all the things that we are talking about. These are new technologies. There are innovative approaches. And we want to help, especially African private sector, help with the dynamism of our people and of our enterprises to get involved. I'm happy to say, I keep mentioning Egypt, but it's not wallahi, it's so happened, but the Benban, the largest photovoltaic solar power plant on earth, the one in Egypt, is an example of even the female-led private small enterprises in Egypt have been involved and implementing and in financing and providing technology. So we need our people to be involved and to help grow provide the solutions for African problems. As we always say, African solutions for African problems.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And with just 30 seconds left, if you have a final thought you'd like to share, either one of you, please do. We don't want to leave here.
I need to profit from this panel to invite all parties to rely the COP28's coalition,
Okay.
presidency's coalition.
Thank you.
To come to Lebanon.
You are cordially invited to come. We have
and
a
visit
very
your
beautiful country.
municipality. I think we should do. I think it's efficiency is as they always say, is the first fuel, is the very first fuel, is a low-hanging fruit, and it has to be coupled with all the other solutions. I mean, for us, especially in Africa, it's one important piece of the puzzle. There are so many things, and they all have to complement each other. And while we do whatever solution we're going to adopt, we have to look at the social implications of that and the practicability and the affordability of that solution to the larger public. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you all, please join me in thanking these panelists. Thank you so much. And we're going to take another quick 5-minute break, not more than 5, and switch out. We have another great panel coming and join us. Thank you.
The world is not on track to meet the Paris Agreement goal and to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's why President von der Leyen has suggested a global pledge on renewables and energy efficiency. Working together to achieve net zero is a must for the climate, a new frontier for technology, an opportunity for businesses, and a driver for good jobs. What is the purpose? This global pledge will create a global movement of countries committed to speed up the energy transition in this critical decade. It would help measure progress on the transition with simple metrics on renewables and energy efficiency. What are the benefits? Why renewables and energy efficiency? Because these are the key solutions to fight climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and create millions of new jobs by 2030. How will we achieve this? The pledge's ultimate goal is to move away from fossil fuel use in a timely manner, consistent with the Paris Agreement. To achieve this, we must collectively aim to triple the world's renewable installed capacity by 2030 to at least 11 terawatts, and double the rate of annual energy efficiency improvements this decade compared to the previous one. Join us, the UAE COP presidency and global leaders for the launch of the pledge at COP28. Together, we can make a difference.
Afternoon, and we are back. And we have with us 4 tremendous panelists. Now, we are pressed for time, so this time I'm not going to read your bios, but these are tremendous, very, very smart people, believe me. And I encourage you to go to the EU COP website so that you can get all the information about them. To my far left is Dr. Daniel Stroth, Director of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Department at the African Development Bank. Next to him is Gianpiero Nachi. He is the Director of Sustainable Business and Infrastructure for the European Bank Group, Reconstruction and Development, correct? Next to him is Kate Brandt, the Chief Sustainability Officer for Google. And next to Kate is Bonnie Brooke, Vice President of Industry Affairs for Siemens Smart Infrastructure, and she's in their international headquarters. So please just briefly welcome this great panel. Daniel, I'm going to start with you because I know you have something that you're supposed to be at now. So we've just gotten finished hearing from our public sector representatives to talk about how they think about efficiency and how we're going to meet these goals. And so I want to start with you to say, what are those policies that you think are going to have the greatest impact on market and private investment in efficiency?
No, thank you very much. And indeed, I think I tried to be too efficient by scheduling 3 panels in a 2-hour time slot. So thank you for accommodating me. I think EU Commissioner Armani has highlighted already, I think sort of set the context as far as Africa is concerned. But maybe just one point to highlight here. It's obviously a very specific context when you have 600 million people without access to electricity. If you look at the consumption on an annual basis for sub-Saharan Africa, it's 500 kilowatt hours per year. That's roughly what a US fridge kind of consumes. If you kind of deduct South Africa from that, you're at just 200 kilowatt hours per year. So it's really minimal. At the same time, there are very significant potential for energy efficiency savings across the continent. Many African countries are now including increasingly energy efficiency in their NDCs, energy efficiency in their renewable energy and wider energy policies, but sort of the readiness of the market is still at an early stage. So if you look at the regulatory indicators for sustainable energy RISE, for example, you see that many African countries score relatively low on the RISE indicators. So there is, from our perspective, an important role of the public sector can play in driving energy efficiency models, for example, through super ESCOs. From our side, we're providing at the moment technical assistance support for the setup super ESCOs in Morocco, but also with KPLC in Kenya. And we've just approved earlier this year a 5 million TA program, the Africa Super ESCO Acceleration Program, to support additional countries on this opportunity. I think it's essential that as multilateral development banks, we help de-risk projects, particularly also for the private sector to come in. I think project preparation is really essential. We need to sort of analyze the opportunities. For example, give you one concrete example is in Senegal, we've been looking at the potential for savings in street lighting. So if we implement this project and finance it now, that would kind of reduce the peak load by 60 megawatts, which is important for a country such as Senegal. The second element is how to de-risk investments, and I think there it's very critical sort of to look at bringing in more commercial banks through kind of lines of credit associated with some blended finance, with some TA facilities to help assess those priorities, to help kind of also companies sort of to apply to the standards that commercial banks are looking at, but also how to use more risks, guarantees, partial credit guarantees, for example, in that market segment. So these are some of the priorities that we're looking at from our side. Sorry for being a little bit quick in my answer, and apologies for leaving very early. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Jean-Pierre, I'm going to ask you to answer the same question.
So, yes, thank you very much. So, I'm so pleased to be here because for a number of reasons, energy efficiency is really at the core of what EBRD climate action has been developed around. We've been the first multilateral development bank with an energy efficiency mandate and energy efficiency team. And since we start tracking climate finance and green finance investments, this was in 2006, 60% of our climate-related investment are in energy efficiency space. So for us, this is clearly an important area of focus. When it comes to the type of activities we do, clearly it's a combination of identifying market approaches. EBRD is a market-oriented, private sector-oriented organization. So for us, this is a core dimension of what we do. And I can give you a couple of examples of type of activities that we have developed to also try to advance the market, but also facilitate investments and finance. One is the work on, let's say, creating instruments. We have something called Green Technology Selector, which is a B2B platform, web-based, where about technology providers in a very, very wide range of technology, we're talking about tens of thousands, can upload information on their technologies. And we set up minimum performance standards for every country where we operate. And this work is then utilized by local banks to lend on-land energy efficiency investments to local SMEs and also to households. And so this is an example of how you create a platform that actually drive progress and advancement in the markets. A second example is the work we are doing in a number of industrial sectors. I think it's important to be context specific and trying to understand the system you're operating within. The work on industrial decarbonization, we've been piloting low carbon pathways in a number of countries. For example, tomorrow we are going to launch the work in Turkey on 4 sectors: steel, aluminium, fertilizers, and cement. And basically the work is to identify the investments that lead to accelerated decarbonization in line with the country objectives. And this is very important because ultimately, if you work with the public institutions, if you work with the sector associations, with the industrial players, and with the finance, you can identify, you can try to achieve convergence in terms of the technology solutions, but also the identification of the investment needs that are required. These accelerate the time it takes from a project concept to reach financial closure.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Kate. And Bonnie, and so same question, but just a little bit differently because you guys aren't coming from the banking finance industry, you're coming from private. And so how do you think about this market and what kind of policies would enable you to make these types of investments to move efficiency forward?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you all. So at Google, we really look at the opportunity that we have to utilize information and innovation to build a more sustainable future with our partners. And so a lot of our work is oriented around how do we enable, whether that's enabling policymakers, enabling customers, or enabling individuals. So I wanted to just give you a few concrete examples of what that looks like, particularly around some of the key sectors for efficiency and decarbonization, both buildings and transportation. So we know, of course, individuals have a really key role to play in addition to policymakers. So I just want to spend a moment talking about individuals since that represents all of us in this room. People are really interested in how to live more sustainably. We see that through Google search trends. Around the world, searches are at all-time highs for things like fuel-efficient routing or electric vehicles. And so we want to give people helpful information in those moments of decision. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. One is fuel-efficient routing in Google Maps. This is that little green leaf that you may have seen that shows up in your routing application now. That's showing you the most fuel-efficient route if it doesn't already have the fastest ETA, and that's leading to real energy efficiency benefits. People have already avoided 2.4 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. That's like taking about 500,000 cars off the road for a year by making that more fuel-efficient choice. And then also when we think about buildings, we know there's a lot of opportunities to drive to deeper energy efficiency in buildings. The Nest Learning Thermostat has been using the power of machine learning to enable homeowners to save energy by understanding their preferences for heating and cooling. And then more recently in the US, we've introduced a feature called Nest Renew, which also enables optimization to times of the day when the grid is cleaner. So that's enabled our customers since 2011 to save 100 billion kilowatt hours of energy. That could power Portugal for 2 years. So then just to turn to how we're supporting policymakers, we talked a little bit about public-private partnerships with the mayor earlier. We've focused a lot on cities, enabling cities in their climate action journey, and that starts with giving them helpful information again. So we have a tool called the Environmental Insights Explorer. This is available for 7,000 cities across Europe. It includes information like the carbon footprint of your building stock, the carbon footprint of your transportation system, the solar potential of your rooftops. And so by putting that information in the hands of policymakers, they can drive towards deeper energy efficiency and emissions reductions. And that goes for businesses as well. We have solutions through Google Cloud that are using the power of machine learning to help businesses that are doing routing and logistics to reduce fuel. That's not only reducing emissions and energy use, but also costs.
Bonnie,
Okay. You can hear me well?
can you hear
Yes?
Bonnie? Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm really, really excited to be here and have the opportunity to talk about the transformational power and the positive impact of Siemens in the transition to the clean and digital future. So we heard a lot about digitalization before, and we know that in the new energy system, which is not the traditional one-way energy supply, there is a lot of complexity. And we are not talking simply about energy efficiency of individual assets or equipment or process. We are talking about system efficiency. System efficiency is the new normal. So, of course, we need all these energy efficient products, equipment, processes, operations. We need the efficient grids and efficient buildings and efficient transport. But in order to manage this new distributed energy system, we need to manage the complexity with digitalization. Now, I'm very lucky and proud to work for a company like Siemens right now, because we are really addressing the main challenges of our times and in the future, and we are involved in the industries that are the backbone of economies. And here I'm talking about industries, manufacturing, about transport, about buildings and grids. And if I want to actually combine the real and the virtual worlds, which is what Siemens is doing, adding the digitalization, what we're talking about is smart infrastructure, including intelligent buildings and smart grids, as well as electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Then we're talking about digital industries, and this is where Siemens is actually advancing to build the industrial metaverse, which is not the metaverse we have heard about. It is actually a metaverse that will solve real problems, and it will immerse in a factory, digitally designed factory, to basically optimize the energy usage, the water usage, sources in general, as well as the safety of the operators in the factories. And then, of course, sustainable mobility is also our focus, which is actually the railway infrastructure, but also the trains of Siemens. And I was very happy, she's not here anymore, the lady from the African Union. But actually, Siemens is providing the trains and the management of the train system in Egypt, as well as the smart grids that were said, okay, Egypt has the smart grid, so we are also involved there in a big project. What would help us? That was the initial question. Mm-hmm. Well, this is a cliche, I would say, but it is a very clear, long-term targets in the policies. So to bring the certainty for private investments in this areas, regions, countries. So we need to have the certainty that when we go there, there will be a market environment and we'll get the support and we'll get the engagement of the local community as well. Second one, incentives. So these policy instruments, like incentives, they should incentivize the right behavior of industries, companies, and citizens. So the ones that actually, what is the right behavior, you would probably ask. Right behavior is aligned with the strategies and the targets of the region. In Europe, the right behavior is you have to be carbon neutral by 2050. How you're going to do that, it's up to you. You have to aim for a 55, the Fit for 55 package, 55% reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So we have a whole package in Europe with many, many policies that actually have calculated that this target of 55% is achievable. And perhaps the last one is to foster cross-collaboration. I think this is absolutely essential.
So we're going to talk a little bit about innovation and how we're going to pay for it, those two things together. We heard in the previous panel, 600 million people in Africa do not have access to electricity. That's an enormous opportunity. And I would suggest that if you talk to an everyday person walking down the street and you said energy efficiency, they would not say technology is what they meant, is what that is. So I'm going to ask you, Kate, to talk a little bit, both of you, talk a little bit about what do we mean by innovation and how innovation can drive efficiency. And then when you're done, I want you to talk about how are we going to pay for all of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we started to get at some of that in your first question. Right. But first, I just do really want to acknowledge the really incredible, speaking of policy, forward-leaning policy that the European Union has implemented around energy efficiency and clean energy. And that includes the digital sector. And we've been very keen at Google to be great supporters of that. So that, the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact is something that we helped to found, which is committed to bringing data centers to climate neutral by 2030 in support of the European Green Deal. And then, when we look at the huge opportunity of digitalization to drive energy efficiency, as you said, sometimes that's underappreciated, I think. And Accenture did a great study a couple of years ago, which showed that migrating to cloud, taking traditional IT loads that might be, in the server closet down your hall, and migrating those onto a cloud system could reduce emissions by 6%. And that would be equivalent to about 60 million tons of CO2 globally per year. So there's a big opportunity there. And so we're seeing this, of course, as something that we can add a lot of value at Google. We also strive to operate our data centers as efficiently as possible. We're getting 3 times more compute for the same amount of electricity as compared to 5 years ago. And also we're giving our cloud customers tools that they can use to become more efficient. So we have a tool called Active Assist that is enabling customers like Uber, for example, to look at workloads that they're no longer productive and then reduce those. It reduces their energy consumption, and it also can save money. And then further, we are, beyond efficiency. I just do want to note, of course, that I think the African minister before us was talking about we need to have a complementary set of solutions, and we also see carbon-free energy as being very critical to that. So we've made a commitment that we want to operate all of our offices and data centers on 24/7 carbon-free energy on every grid where we operate. And also, we think it's essential that ultimately grids around the world can drive towards that level of deep decarbonization. And so we've put forward some policy recommendations that we think will really help us get there around how do we invest in more innovation, and also how do we put in place the right incentives for interlinkages of grids, getting more transmission built to really get us there.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
You want me to
Yes,
talk now?
please.
Okay, all right. Innovation, I have a lot to say about that.
Okay.
That's one of the ways, of course, to accelerate the transition. So Siemens invests 8%, or that was last year, invested 8% of the revenue globally in R&D, so research and development. We have over 46,000 patents last year. We have over 4,000 innovations last year. We have over 46,000 experts working in research and development. We do have, or we do believe in the power of collaboration, because this is what also powers the scaling and acceleration of the transition. So no company, no country, no one can do it by themselves. So we really seek, foster, and facilitate the collaboration globally. We have an ecosystem for innovation, so Siemens Innovation Platform, which was initially designed just for internal use, but now it's open to many other people externally as well. We also innovate by our participation in different platforms and initiatives, like the Estanium platform, which is actually tracking the CO2 emissions throughout the life cycle of a product. We innovate all the time. We innovate every minute. It's very hard to give examples, but let's say one of the interesting applications that we entered is actually agriculture. We are helping to digitalize agriculture, so vertical farms. And we have examples in Europe and the US where we have a fully automated process. It's called seed to fruit. And everything is automated, as I said, digitalized. And we have our buildings, industries, our financial services involved in that as well. And we are experimenting. So I really need to mention one of the big cases, which is actually the Aspern Smart City Research. Aspern is a district of Vienna, and this is the largest energy research project in Europe. And what we, it's like a suburb, it's a district, and this is an absolutely experimental grounds, but actually people live, work, study there. And Siemens is one of the companies that's participating there. Of course, it has also invested in there. And we are using our own technologies and solutions and services to actually realize this dream of a smart, sustainable city. And in phase one of the project, we have already set up, together with other participants, the infrastructure to collect data and pilot projects that we could replicate in the future. So, and now we are moving in phase two towards demand-side flexibility, as we call it, yeah. So smart grids and so on. So the integration of also sector integration, not just energy, but also heating and so on. So there's a lot of playground for us, awesome. If you want, and we learn and we innovate again.
Gian Piero, please, how are we going to pay for all of this great
Perhaps
stuff?
Before we go into how to pay, I would like to link to a point that Bonnie made before.
Sure.
There are clearly a number of triggers that really incentivize intrinsical innovation. So Bonnie talked about policy consistency, policy clarity. We know very well that industrial systems tend to actually react in a very flexible and effective way when the policy is clear, when the policy drivers are clear and the policy objectives are clear. So we also need to create the incentives that are not necessarily requiring a different distribution of capital or the need of substantial incentive. So that's very important. In terms of who pays, I would like to come with 3 points. I'm talking more about the deployment and innovation rather than necessarily the early stage R&D. The first element is about carbon pricing. I think there is enough experience that when environmental externalities are priced, carbon is priced, actually there is a trigger effect in the market and innovation is accelerated and is deployed at larger scale. Second point is about understanding risks and risk management. We see, you talk about cities, we have a large green city program. We support city understanding their performance and against international benchmarks. When information is provided, typically innovation is supported and incentivized. And the third element is also the importance to support organization, in particular the private companies, in the transition, in the application of more innovative practices and technology. Bonnie mentioned the agricultural sector. We work a lot, for example, in Ukraine with companies that are moving from traditional farming practices to regenerative farming practices, precision agriculture. What they need is not only the capital to support this transition, but also the guarantee instruments that allow them to navigate the transition. Typically, if you move to regenerative agricultural practices, you have years where the yield is lower before the benefits kicks in terms of reduced amount of inputs, in terms of increased yield, increased resilience in the crop productions. There are periods where, of course, there are fluctuations in the output. So these instruments are really important to facilitate the deployment at scale of innovation. Thank you.
Well, I'm so sorry that we are at time, but I want to give you each at least 30 seconds to give us the final thoughts. We have people online watching, so I think it's important for us to hear from your last final thought. What should we not walk away from here not remembering? I'm going to ask you, Jean-Pierre, first.
So I think it's important to reflect on the fact that there are steps that each sector needs to take to decarbonize and to embrace and facing the multiple crises that the world is facing. Energy efficiency remain a very core, very immediate, tangible activity. So I think the final plea from my side is that let's remain very focused on energy efficiency. Okay. The previous panel will talk about resource efficiency. There is a very strong correlation between the two things. So it's really, let's build on what we know. Let's build on the innovative practices that companies like Google and Siemens bring. From the financial sector, we like energy efficiency, generates fast returns. Typically, it's low risk in many cases. So from the financial sector, we are ready to contribute.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, I think, of course, we've been discussing today energy efficiency and then the innovations that are going to drive even deeper energy efficiency. And I think the most promising thing we've seen in a long time is the power of AI to further optimize our systems. And I gave some of those examples in my remarks, but I think that's how we're going to drive towards the next generation of optimization, whether that's, as I mentioned, fuel-efficient routing, sequencing traffic lights in a city, reducing contrails from aviation through better routing. We are very bullish on that. We published a piece of research last week just before the COP with BCG, which showed the power of AI to enable an increase in a 10% of emissions reductions by further accelerating the existing solutions we have today. That's the equivalent of the entire emissions of the European Union. So a huge opportunity to pair innovation through AI to drive towards deeper efficiency.
Awesome. And Bonnie?
Okay, I'll try in 30 seconds. So there is a lot of potential in energy efficiency. I just wanted to bring the few figures that I have from our energy performance contracting business. So in average, through these contracts, which we actually finance initially, you can have return on investment in 8 years in average. You can save 27% in average. I'm talking just about last year, which was not a fantastic year for energy efficiency. Performance contracting. What I would like to say is that system efficiency is what you have to remember. We need energy efficiency in the system. We need everyone to participate, to be able to participate. You cannot have energy efficiency in today's energy system without digitalization, because you need to manage the complexity. And the third thing is to invite everyone to join us on our accelerator platform, which is an open digital business platform for collaboration with everyone, basically. So we have a portfolio of products, hardware, software, services, solutions that are not just Siemens, but also of our partners. So anyone that joins this platform can also bring what they want. Trusted partners, of course, verified partners, because cybersecurity is very important for us. But this is a fantastic beginning that we are absolutely looking forward to working with everyone and everywhere across the world. And it will make it happen. Thank you.
So we now know efficiency is actually how we're going to make money. Great returns on efficiency. AI is where we should be heading if we want to get that extra 10%, which is big. And we need to be thinking about systems and not silos. And what I will say is I can't wait to see you next year where we're at 4 to 5%. Because we've made this pledge, it's time to get to work. Please thank my panelists and have a great day. Thank you.